Okay, YouTubers, space detectives, alien detectives. Today I'm doing a bit of an overview of some of the things that have been in the news recently and over the last year or two. And I'm going to show you very briefly some little excerpts from some of these news articles, mainly from the Express, but from a few other sources as well. I'm not going to go into great detail about each story because I'll put links to these below in the description so you can check them yourself. Because otherwise we'd be here all day because I don't have time to read all this stuff out. So to start with, let's have a look at this one. Now, this was in the Sunday Express, actually. Brian Cox shocks BBC radio host with astonishing claim. No doubt there are Martians. Okay, now this guy is famous in the UK and in Europe more than in America and elsewhere. So if you're from the US, you may not have heard of this guy. But he's our kind of top kind of physicist, public physicist anyway. And he does all the TV shows and stuff like that about this kind of science and planetary sciences and that kind of thing. And he actually said this, I've just highlighted it here. Brian Cox stunned BBC Radio 1 presenter Greg James with a space theory that there are Martians and there is no doubt about it. The physicist told BBC Radio 1, we have some new missions going to Mars called ExoMars, which the UK are involved in, which is true, of course. It is searching for signs of life below the surface of Mars. So there is certainly no doubt that there are Martians. Okay. Now, that's interesting. And it carries on about more speculation here, and there's a little short video clip here. So he's really put his neck out on the line here, which kind of surprised me. Now this was dated, is there a date here? Yeah, this was actually to April the 20th, so that's a while back now, but fairly recent, this article. There's also this one here. NASA finally addresses claims of ancient civilization on Red Planet, and of course they deny it in this article. And anyone who suggests that there might be a civilization on Mars, or was, is called a conspiracist. So this is what we get. And they often show really poor quality images like this as evidence, which is why no one believes it, because they're deliberately showing the worst possible pictures of any possible thing. Which is, I mean, what the hell is this supposed to be? You know, the newspapers really need to get a grip of themselves and start showing proper images, which I have sent them many of, and instead of showing crap like this piece of crap, a totally blurred out image of some fuzzy rubbish. You know, I mean, some of these are actually not too bad. The thing is, in the past, the press were sent lots of images by people who really didn't know what they're talking about. And they still have these images in their archives, and they put them in all these little playlist things. And all it does is put people off. You know, whereas when I send them something, I give images that actually show something like this, which is a story I got up about a month ago, and this was in a few papers. I sent it to everybody, but a lot of them didn't print it and show it because I think it was just too good for them. Because it clearly is a skull, you know, and it's got teeth and a jaw and eye sockets, and all the proportions are kind of humanoid, but just much bigger. This thing is probably about 2 foot wide. This skull, which would make this a giant humanoid. But this was in a few others. I've had countless stories in the press in the past. And quite a lot recently. I'm not going to go through them all now because we would really be here all day. All you have to do is look me up. And incidentally, when you do use a search engine, if you type in ArtAlienTV and aliens on Mars or something like that, or buildings on Mars or whatever, don't use Google. Google no longer works as a proper search engine. Use anything but Google. Use Bing or Firefox, whatever, anything but. Because Google doesn't really work. The results you get on Google are very censored and, what's the word for it? They are pushed in a certain direction, and that direction is certainly not mine. So you don't get real results if you look me up on Google anymore, even though I inadvertently work for Google, as I have a YouTube channel. So when you do searches, it's difficult to get real results unless you use a different search engine now, because Google's basically broken. It doesn't work. It will work partly, but the results are very skewed. There's also this story here. NASA great alien cover-up. Space agency breaks silence to claim it is hiding the truth. Claim it is hiding the truth. This guy here has challenged NASA to come out and say whether they're hiding evidence of a previous civilization on Mars. Paul Hertz, his name is Astrophysics Division Director of NASA headquarters in Washington, hit back with a categorical denial of any cover-up. Oh yeah. Well, you can guarantee that if they're denying it, they're actually addressing the issue. You can guarantee if they have to sit there and deny it in front of a committee, you can guarantee they're lying, and you can guarantee that they are actually covering it up, because otherwise they wouldn't have even been asked to go there by these people to actually make an announcement. The very fact they're being pressured into an announcement means that they are holding back, but they're just not being allowed to say it. Now, of course, who would if you were an alien civilization coming to Earth, and you say, right, take me to your leader. I mean, who would the possible aliens come to speak to? Would it be the President of the United States? Would it be Vladimir Putin? Would it be someone else? China? Who knows? Personally, I think it should be William Shatner from Star Trek, the original Star Trek. But that's just my opinion. He's a nice guy, and he's open-minded and quite clever. So that's my personal favourite. But in fact, that would be a good poll to have. If any of you have any ideas, who should we nominate as a spokesperson for Earth? Should it be a politician? Should it be a scientist? Should it be someone like Brian Cox, for instance? He would be very good. Should it be a TV personality or actor like William Shatner, or somebody else, a sports person, or a personality, a comedian, or perhaps someone who works for the United Nations, or a great zoologist like I used to work for, like Dr. Ian Redmond? He'd be very good. I mean, he communicates with animals, so perhaps he would be a very good guy to communicate with aliens in that scenario. Who knows? I mean, perhaps they wouldn't need someone like him to communicate, but they could probably speak English. I mean, they've probably been watching our TV shows for, well, decades and decades, which have been going out into space, listening to our radio broadcasts that have been going out into space since over 100 years ago. So they probably got a good command of English and other Earth languages like Chinese and Russian and whatever. So I'm not going to go through all of these in great detail now. I mean, there was this guy. Now, I was doing a bit of research the other day. There's this guy called Dr. J. Allen Hynek. Now, this is the guy we have to blame, or we have to go back to in history, who invented the terms of the terminology swamp gas or weather balloon. It's largely attributed to this guy. I don't know if it was weather balloon that he came up with, but of course, this guy actually was a very clever guy, and he was a friend of Clyde Tom Bowers, actually, the guy who I recently found out in the last year or so that discovered that spotted a massive explosion on Mars. Dr. Clyde Tom Bowers. But this guy was a friend of his. Now, this guy was actually employed in the Project Blue Book in the 50s by the CIA to actually debunk all the UFO sightings that were going on in the USA. Now, of course, we had Roswell in '47, but there were a whole bunch of UFO sightings and possible crashes in the US in that period, and there were dogfights between American jet fighters, and they were chasing down some of these UFOs that were buzzing around in the late 40s and 50s, and this went on for decades until the sort of, well, arguably until now even, but you know, there was a real spate of it in that period after World War II. Incidentally, a lot of it may have been Nazi technology, but a lot of these things probably weren't, because they had flight characteristics unseen and unheard of even in the sort of physics, known physics that we adhere to on Earth. In other words, these craft were doing crazy things that we just couldn't possibly do or even imagine, really. So, but this guy basically was a skeptic, a professional skeptic, and he was actually paid by the CIA, I think. Well, that may not actually say that in this Wikipedia article here, but his opinions shifted after conducting an informal poll of his astronomer colleagues in the early 50s. Among those he queried were Clyde Tombaugh, who discovered the dwarf planet Pluto. Of 44 astronomers, 5, over 11%, had seen aerial objects that they could not account for with established mainstream science. Most of these astronomers had not widely shared their accounts for fear of ridicule or damage to their reputations or careers. Tombaugh was an exception, having only openly discussed his own UFO sightings. So you can read more up on that. There'll be a link to this as well. Basically, it was the CIA who came up with these conspiratorial kind of terms like swamp gas and weather balloon to try and debunk anybody or dissipate any interest in the subject by people who were interested in the Roswell craft especially, and other UFOs that were spotted around that time. And it's a term that's still used today, pretty much. The weather balloon, it's one of those terms. And of course now anyone who proposes that there is life on Mars or might still be people on our moon gets called a conspiracy theorist or conspiracist or something. Now that was also a term that was invented or created by the CIA to debunk anybody or threaten anybody who didn't believe the narrative on the JFK assassination in 1963. Okay, this is common knowledge. At the time, people didn't realise what was going on. In fact, especially in the US, I do actually think, and this is quite a well-known fact by a lot of researchers have come to this conclusion, that the public in the US have been subject to basically a psyops gig, really, a kind of psyops operation since the assassination of JFK, and going back right to Roswell, and a few other events as well. This is why we get this kind of flavour of reporting in the press, even in the UK. This is why they always come out with things like conspiracy theorist. Yeah, conspiracy theory. They cannot. It's almost impossible for them to actually print an article without using that terminology, which says to me, obviously, that they've been subjected to the same sort of pressures as some of these scientists were by the CIA or other organisations similar to the CIA around the world, but especially from America. The deep state, whatever you want to call them. There's this one, I've been to Mars and it's full of alien bodies, claims lawyer in bid to be US president. This is interesting. This is Basigo, Andrew Basigo. And he even goes into some detail here. He's in his paper, the discovery of life on Mars in 2008, which had evidence of mass grave on the red planet. Yeah, basically the paper he wrote, he said that in a ravine southwest of the home plate in the Gusev crater on Mars, there was a mass grave of several hundred humanoid bodies, both male and female, clothed in uniform blue clothes suggestive of regimentation. Now, I have actually found similar things to this in many images where there are what look like multiple skulls and remains of humanoids. Usually just skulls and a few bones and fragments, but often not whole bodies. I found a couple of corpses. There have been a few, but most of them are broken up, and it's generally just the skulls that are left behind. But of course, the bones may be buried below. So that does kind of tally with what I found. And of course, this has only recently come to light. I didn't know about this guy until fairly recently. And in fact, he's been ridiculed massively and claims to be from the establishment. So I don't really know if he's telling the truth, but some of the things he said do match up with what I've been finding on the surface. So that's very interesting. This was the really cool one, the Brian Cox one. I've showed you that already. There's this article here as well. Scientist claims proof that NASA is hiding alien life on Mars. This is a guy from the UK as well. A guy called, researcher, stroke scientist called Barry De Gregorio, and from the University of Buckingham. So scientists are finally actually coming out and starting to say what us Mars and Moon researchers have been saying for years. They're actually starting to come out. I did actually challenge Brian Cox. I sent him, I think I sent him an email or something about a year or two ago. Or I think there was an article on some site by him, and he was answering questions to people who were asking stuff in the comments. I sent him a link to one of my videos and a couple of pictures, I think, or a few videos. I sent links to him. Didn't get any reply, of course, but maybe he actually watched some of the evidence I've got and took it on board. And because he has sort of changed his tune recently, Brian Cox. And this guy is pretty cool as well. He claims that some of these structures in the rocks, like this, on Mars, are actually fossils, and he could well be correct. I kind of agree with him. There's lots of things like this on Mars. A lot of it looks like organic, fossilized organics, like plants and small kind of creatures and sea creatures, that kind of thing. But of course, when you found giant things like this, I'm not saying that small fossils aren't just as important. They are, but things like this, I mean, are really literally in your face, and may shock people. And I actually do think a lot of people are suffering from culture shock here, which is why I get attacked by so many people every day, and that's kind of dissipated a bit now. But when you get a viral video or video that does really well, the better the video does, the more people watch that video that aren't really into the subject and don't know much about it, and then attack you for suggesting there might be life on Mars. Now, whether that will carry on now after the recent NASA announcement about possible microbes and methane on Mars, which we've known about for a long time, perhaps they might change their tune a bit, because it does seem that the establishment scientists are changing their tune, finally. I've challenged them to do this many times in the past, over the last few years. And I really think finally we are starting to see mainstream scientists come out and openly say that there was life on Mars. Not just microbes, not just methane caused by microbes under the surface or on the surface or whatever, but actual intelligent life in the past or possibly now. As Bolden, the director of NASA, said only a couple of years ago. So the sands are shifting on Mars, literally, in both our reaction to this exopolitics subject and other people who are not just scientists but military people as well, perhaps, and it's really down to the military, because the military are actually controlling this narrative. And as long as you have the military groups or quasi-military groups in America especially controlling the narrative on this, we're never going to get an open admission by a NASA scientist on a big TV show somewhere saying, oh, by the way, there were aliens on Mars and there probably still is somewhere. They're not going to say that, because the military are in control of them and won't let them. Which is why us civilians really need to push this and get it into the press, like I've been trying to do, and try and force the issue. Okay, now I'm just going to show a couple of these. I'm not going to go through all of these now, this will take too long, but I've every single time I post one of these things, someone comes up and says, oh, it's just a rock. Okay, right, this is just a rock, is it? This weird thing sticking out. It may be made of rock. It's even got a little roof on it. Roof structure. I mean, these are just covers from some of my videos. That's not natural. Look at that, it's got a little roof. And it's got nice structure to it, you know, there's loads of stuff here. A lot of this I published years ago, but you can go through my channel and take a look. This was found by Vladimir, great find this. The battle tank on Mars, this is only a small tank. This is probably only about 5 or 10 feet long, it's really small. Doesn't mean it's not a tank though, does it? We have small tanks. They're not all massive. Most of them are, but there are some very small ones. There are even remote control tanks used, miniature ones used in the 1940s by the Germans to try and blow up Russian tanks and stuff. They would put a bomb on it and drive it up to the Russian tank and drive underneath it and blow the bejesus out of it. You know, I mean, there's loads of things. I mean, this was found by Martin Graney, so there are lots of other researchers finding these things as well. A couple of what look like mummified, encrusted alien people. Man and woman. Woman here with her arm here. Many of you have probably seen this already. Great find that. Absolutely amazing. This is one of my favourites, which is one I found. This is an Opportunity rover image, PIA 20319. So all these can be verified. All the videos that I've done have the links to the image below in the description, as always. Anyone can check them up. Anyone can check it. This is why people are scared, because these are official images. Now, of course, what they're now starting to do and have been doing increasingly is claiming we've never been to Mars, or that all the images are fake. Now, I do actually think some of the images are doctored, but they're not all fake. Some of them are partially obfuscated. Some of them are quite heavily obfuscated. But they are real images. This can be determined by the fact that in many of the images, if you look through the rover catalogues of images, there's pictures of Phobos in a lot of them. Now, Phobos isn't an Earth moon. It's a very odd shape. It's shaped like a weird sort of potato, giant potato, you know. Now, that can only be, those images could only be obtained from the Mars surface by the rover. So that's one way of proving that we are there. But of course, you have a lot of poor quality images and images that are doctored, and that also goes for the moon. And there's one of my video covers there showing these structures. But you can't see these until you really brighten up the image. You've got to actually get the image, take a clip, brighten it right up, and these things start to appear, because a lot of the time they are obfuscated deliberately by the people at JPL. So what we're dealing with here is a massive cover-up on a scale that is so enormous it's almost impossible to comprehend. And in fact, this is why the newspapers are scared of this subject, I think, to a large extent, although some, like the Express, regularly post stories about this, more so than most newspapers. A lot of the press are scared because they don't want to get into trouble. They know that the military are kind of holding back on this and preventing NASA from coming out with disclosure. And they're worried about getting targeted themselves, I think. And they're scared, and probably with good reason. And many people from NASA have disappeared, or not disappeared. I think in the last 2 years, something like 73 NASA employees have died in things like car accidents, all in the last couple of years. A shocking rate of people that work for NASA have mysteriously all died recently in car accidents. So there is something going on. I mean, this is a good example of obfuscation by NASA. Perfect example. You can see here that this sand has been copied and pasted. It's been copied from another part of the image and then pasted over this part of the image. You can actually see here, this is completely fake. You can see the texture differences here. You've got real sand here, and then the texture disappears and is all kind of smudged. So that sand texture should carry on right up there if that was real. But it's not. That's been obfuscated, okay? That is absolute evidence of obfuscation. And I've also shown this with some of the moon images as well. This happens all the time. They've been doing this since the 1960s. They're not going to stop now. This can quite easily be demonstrated. And of course, you know, I get a lot of people come to my channel and say, "Oh, it's just a rock. It's swamp gas. You know, it's swamp gas." Yeah, does it like? is this swamp gas? This particular weather balloon here has, Mother Nature has carved eyes and a nasal cavity and teeth in this weather balloon. Oh, and this weather balloon here. Sewer outlet. Yeah, that's obviously a weather balloon, and it's got swamp gases obviously come out and eroded down from the pipes here. Yeah, must be. Got to be swamp gas, you know. This thing here must be a weather balloon. Has to be, doesn't it? I mean, it's white like a balloon. It's not a pointed dome, is it? No, it's not a huge building. This is probably 300 to 400 foot high. This thing, if not a bit bigger. I'd call it the observatory. You know, obviously a weather balloon. Yeah. And this guy found by Sarah Runcie, weather balloon. Yeah. Obviously, it's kind of round, isn't it? So it must be a weather balloon. I mean, how would a weather balloon have eyes, nose, and mouth like that? Beyond me, oh, I don't know. This obviously must be a weather balloon, because weather balloons have teeth and a clear jawline and eye sockets. Yeah, and a very nice nasal cavity there, upper maxilla, pointy teeth. I wouldn't have liked to have met this guy when he was alive, assuming it was a guy. Could have been a girl. Who knows? And we have objects like this. I mean, I could go on all day showing you clips of this. I'm not going to, because there's just too many. You know, one of my favourites here is probably, obviously, the Sphinx, the giant Sphinx, which I've republished recently and got in the press again. That's one of my favourites. So these can all be seen on my channel. I've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of objects like this that many of which have been in the press. This one was in the press recently. That's a find by Steve Bolden, who's found some great stuff recently. So if you want to check out a lot of this stuff, and perhaps if you want to download some of these images like I've got here, you can come on to ArtAlienTV Mars magazine, and if you click on the pictures, photos here, and scroll down, you will see all my enhanced meme clips will be on there. Okay, you can just click on that and scroll down, or you might just see one that I put up recently, like this one. You can just download it. You can just right click on it and save it. If you want to collect any of these, you're welcome to do that. They're perfectly free for you to do so. Absolutely no problem. But you can't use them in a video without my permission. But if you ask, I may say yeah. So that's fine. So there we are. I think I better call it a day there, because this has been quite a long video. I mean, I could go on through these images forever, really, because there's so many. But some of these recent finds are really quite clear, and some of the older ones even are really quite clear. I'm very careful to try and choose images that are clear enough to show the public, and I think a lot of channels make the mistake of picking images that are really poor or too far away. And they do have genuine finds, but you've really got to focus on the closer things and the larger things that are visible even in these low-res images. And now and again you get a really cool one like this, where you've got something outlined by the darker shadows behind, and it shows the shape really well, like this little guy, this little Martian statue. So there we are. I mean, just go through my channel. If you're new to this channel, go through my older videos. There's loads and loads of stuff going back 5 years now. I've been doing this almost as long as the rover has been on Mars, which will be 5 years about now-ish, I think. So check it out. I won't go through any more of those. You can quite easily go through my channel and check them out. Thanks for watching, everybody. If you're not a member of Mars Magazine, come along. It's completely free. You get a free app, and you can check out a lot of this stuff here and get loads of free software and cool stuff, all sorts of stuff. So thank you for watching, everybody. Please share on social media if you can. Give the thumbs up, and I will see you soon.